I sold all my Creality machines not too long ago, but now I'm beginning to wonder if I should be looking at Creality a little bit more seriously again. Today we're having a quick look at the Creality Hi. It's a multicolor bed slinger that promises to be user-friendly and quality for those that are looking to begin their journey in 3D printing. It's relatively inexpensive and it's packed full of features, most notably 4-color printing. But with all these machines focusing on these multicolor systems, is this just Creality rushing to catch up and fill the segment? Or did they actually do something well here? There it is. Now before I get into the setup and unboxing, I want to share some of my initial results. I was pretty excited to test out this printer, and with a price just under $500 for the combo, I mean, who wouldn't be excited, right? I have a feeling this machine's going to be an excellent entry-level point for a lot of enthusiasts. And unfortunately, as I began printing, I bit the bullet and downloaded Creality Slicer. Now I've heard a lot of criticism about this slicer, but basically it's just Orca Slicer. The controls are oriented in a little bit different way, and it was kind of difficult to find some of the functions that I wanted. But like, by and large, it's a reskinned Orca Slicer. That's fine, but I would prefer using mainline Orca. And as much as I hate to say it, Bamboo kind of opened the door for all these proprietary slicers to be so locked down. But that's the world that we live in, so with the slicer installed, I loaded up one of these record holders and decided to test out the machine using that. I printed some of these on the Anycubic S1 as well as my X1 Carbon just so we'd have a standard basis of comparison just for this piece only. And I've got to say, the results are good. Everything printed out super smooth and the surfaces look pretty good as well. Also, disregard this one layer right here. I powered the machine off mid-print to see what would happen, but really I needed to record on the couch and I didn't want the noise of the machine in the background. But it was for science, for sure. I just shut it off so I could test the machine. Not because I needed to record right then. Let's see how it did. All right, we're gonna push resume. Not too bad. There's a little blob there though. Ooh. Eesh, scraped over the print. I feel like it should know what it's printing though. Like it should know how to not scrape the print, you know? Alright. This was a good test to see if it could recover from power loss and things like that, which is actually something I've been experiencing here and experienced while testing this machine. So I didn't even need to shut it off. It would do it for me when the power went out. Now that said, I wouldn't rely on this feature to finish a print if it's supposed to look good. Luckily, my record holders get covered up by the record, so it's not a big deal that I have this line here, but if you've got something cosmetic you're working on, the print's gonna finish. It's just not gonna look good. But if we're ignoring that, direct comparison to the X1 Carbon, for example, the surfaces aren't quite as good. And of course that's a Core XY machine, this one's a bed slinger, so it's not apples to apples. But if we look at both the prints from the Hi and the Anycubic Cobra S1, all the parts are showing a lot of ringing in the surfaces. Even though both prints were calibrated right before the print started or during this print, we're still getting a lot of vibration artifacts, and some of the surfaces are a little bit glossier at the bottom, where that layer had a longer print layer time, whereas the rest of these aren't as glossy. Just something to consider. It's not the end of the world. These parts still look great, but not quite as good as some other printers perhaps. next, to test out this printer, I decided to see how it would do on a plate full of smaller models. These are usually difficult prints because one of the models failing causes the entire plate to fail. So for the heck of it, I made it multicolor models too. And then adding to the stakes, the print would take a whole day. So if one of them did fail, causing a collapse of the entire plate, well, we just wasted a whole day of printing and review time. Not to mention the amount of filament that it would take. Totally wasted. Okay, so this is what we got going on here. So we'll get back to that plate full of nachos, but first, let's take a look inside the box here. As we open the package here, we find all the components neatly packed in that classic Creality black foam. If you bought a bunch of Creality machines, you probably know this foam. On top, we find the CFS, which is Creality's multicolor system that they've only previously used with the K2 so far. And with that removed, we find something that I really like. Instructions and pictures right inside the box. They're right there. They're present when you need them, and they're only there when you need them. No sifting through a book, no looking through anything to find it, no scanning a QR code for a video. They're just there. Though I'm not sure how necessary these specific instructions are, but it is a nice touch to give new players instructions on how to remove the piece from the box, as well as showing pictures of what it looks like and what's tucked in there so you don't break anything when you take it out. Next, we remove our accessories from the foam packaging after promptly throwing away the spool holder. We have a fancy robot multicolor box, we don't need a spool holder. And then after that, it was time to remove the printer itself. This machine basically ships in 2 pieces, and with some zip ties and foam removed, we're ready to throw this sucker together already. Now this Creality machine's cool, but what if you need something a little bit more advanced to finish your project? Thanks to today's sponsor, JLC 3DP, for sponsoring this video. If you need something made, JLC 3DP can help, and getting started is simple. First, choose your manufacturing process. They offer a wide range of additive manufacturing, including MJF, SLM, SLA, to name a few. But they can also handle your CNC machining needs. And if you click my link below, you can start for as little as 30 cents. And new users get a $60 credit. Just upload your model, select your manufacturing process, pick out the material you want as well as the color if it's applicable, and you're off. The engineers at JLC 3DP will take your model and your manufacturing process and make you a part and ship it. No need to put together an Ender 3v2 kit for 8 hours, struggling to even get a successful print. No need to worry about PETG sticking to your glass bed. Just fast, quality parts manufactured at an affordable rate. So if you like our content, support the companies supporting us, because they're the ones that enable us to continue doing what we enjoy doing, which is providing content for you. Thanks JLC 3DP for sponsoring this part of the video. Now let's get back to this Creality machine that I don't want to like, but I am probably starting to like. Now these days we're pretty spoiled in terms of assembly. The last time I put a Creality machine together by myself, it took well over an hour and it had like a billion pieces to put together. This one's got like a handful of pieces and it took 15 minutes to get up and running. And that was with filming all these 6 shots that I put together for you guys. It's a pretty straightforward process. The instructions are present and clear enough if you're unsure. And really you're looking at 2 main pieces. You've got the base and you've got the Z-axis gantry situation. There's some beefy slots on the side that the Z-axis sits into, and these little mounting ears on the side have provision for screws to go in to fasten everything together. They may be bolts. Screws and bolts are different. I'm pretty sure it's bolts, and I said screws. Somebody correct me in the comments and explain the difference between the 2 fasteners so we can all learn together. So there's a bit of a trick to plugging in these cables before you can install these cover plates. You have to really tuck in the cables like all the way before getting the plates anywhere near it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to fit it. But once you have those tucked away, the fasteners installed, these plates go on, no worries. And then this is what it looks like if you have to take the plate off because you forgot to install the fasteners. You're welcome. After that, the final fastener is installed on the back, and this piece is completely and finally fitted to the machine. With the two joined, the final plug can be plugged in on the back right of the gantry. And as a side note to that, if it's not plugged in all the way, your machine's not going to work when you first turn it on. I thought we got a junk machine because it wasn't working properly. I didn't push this plug in all the way. Push it in all the way. I guess the machine might be junk. It's Creality. I'm kidding. It's fine. Now this is the point where the instructions direct you to a spool holder. We opted out because we have a CFS. But if you're printing materials that are flexible or abrasive, they're not suitable for use with the CFS. You're probably going to need a spool holder in that case. We typically print these from a poly dryer because those materials often are hygroscopic as well, so it's good to keep them dry. Moving on, it was time to install some CFS related things. It did take me some trial and error to figure out the exact configuration of some of the wires and the Bowden tubes that are going on here. There is a separate booklet for CFS specific instructions, but the instructions in there were a little bit more sparse. But there were QR codes so you could watch a video, and I hate that. I want instructions in the book and I want a QR code. Somebody spent some time making that video and that's great, but don't just make it one or the other. I'm not going to scan your QR code. Maybe that's just me. So even if it meant spending more time unnecessarily and maybe even installing something incorrectly, I was not going to subject myself to watching a video on the internet. I mean, who would do that? Not that you should stop watching this video on the internet, like, don't stop. Please don't leave. But after using this supplied super sticky double-sided tape, the filament buffer was mounted on the side, and I was finally able to plug in all the necessary wires and tubes to get this thing started. Now, I'll get to our first startup, but first I want to show you this purge bin that I designed. This is a common addition to any of these multicolor printers that have purge waste because they use the same one common nozzle. And as I was looking at the machine, I began to think of what kind of design I could use for a purge bin. I like to use magnets in my designs, so the purge bin actually stays stuck to the side of the machine during printing, but the sides of this case aren't actually metal. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do there quite yet. Luckily, it was then that I realized there were two spots right around here that have a bit of a magnetic attraction. Not very strong, but just enough. So I quickly measured up some dimensions so I could get the general shape, and then I hopped into Onshape to finish out my design a little bit more. The design's basically a rectangle with a bite taken out of it, so it's nothing crazy. I extruded my shape that I drew up and shelled it out after installing holes for some magnets. And from there I implemented a bit of a draft angle to kind of complement the slight draft angle that the base has. And then it was just a matter of adding some fillets and chamfers to round out the design and prepare it for printing. I chose this gray and white color scheme because printing one color with a multicolor machine is kind of lame. We have the capabilities, we're gonna use it. You could print with 4 colors, we should be printing with 4 colors. I've actually failed by only doing 2 colors. Even though this part's more expensive because we have purge waste and we have a prime tower, it's the right thing to do. At any rate, it seemed to print well, and after I screwed up on the first one, the second one fits the machine pretty nicely. I'll have this link below if you want to use it with your Creality Hi as well. Back to our machine again. The printer setup went well, as you might expect. We powered this sucker on and began clicking through the menus. This is where we do things like set our language and Wi-Fi network if you're going to go that route. Basic stuff. I downloaded the Creality Cloud app at this point and paired our machine to that. This allows access to your machine, and you can do things like monitor the camera to see how your print's going, and all those sorts of things. And that's a feature I'd love to take advantage of, but for some reason, no matter what I do, my machine doesn't think there's a camera connected to it. Is right there. But this cloud app is also where you can find Creality's model repository. There weren't many models available that were specific to this machine just yet, so I didn't spend very much time playing around with this feature. But if you've got the correct machine and stuff, this is super cool because you can print directly from your phone as long as your printer is able to connect to that app. It's similar to the Bamboo Handy app with MakerWorld. As this gets built out more for Creality, I'm sure it's going to be just as useful, if not more useful, than MakerWorld. As it stands right now, they just need to solve the problem of having so many different machine profiles, but the idea is solid and proven. Actually, I didn't even check the preloaded files on the machine to see if they had anything in there. Maybe they had a purge bin. They've totally got a purge bin on here. Now back to the machine, the screen is actually pretty good. Although it does seem like maybe it takes a bit harder of a touch to actually get it to register sometimes. It's still a great and responsive, bright unit. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about some of the components of the UI. I mean, some of the menus that you have to interact with just aren't as intuitive as they possibly could have been. They're fine, there's just some room for improvement, I think. For example, let's say you're mapping out colors on your CFS. You select the spool that you want to edit, then you select what material you want to use. But you can't hit back, because it won't save. You need to hit OK at this point. Then you navigate back and you select the color. And then again, you push OK, not back. You push OK, it takes you back. And then you push OK again, and it navigates you back to the beginning. And it's as simple as that. Your color's saved for one of the slots of your CFS. Now you just do that 3 more times. Maybe this isn't the biggest deal, but I find myself becoming more and more annoyed every time I do it. Maybe it's just me. Otherwise, everything else is pretty straightforward. Now, we've seen the CFS before. When we opened Paul's Creality K2, it also had this same unit. It's a dead ringer for an AMS, but this box also includes a screen. This is a great addition because it gives you access to some valuable metrics like temperature and humidity. It's not anything groundbreaking, but if you have a multicolor box that's really similar to the other multicolor boxes on the market, it's a pretty good value add, and it's something that makes you stand out a little bit. Otherwise, there's a couple of little features that separate this from the other boxes on the market, like the ACE or the AMS. One of the main differences is this filament buffer inside the lid here. Buffer, spool holder, tensioner. I don't really know what to call this thing. These are basically spring-loaded pads that keep constant tension or pressure down on the spool as it's being fed into the CFS. Once the spool gets too light, this little pad helps keep the spool seated inside the cradle so it doesn't jump up and cause any issues while printing. And previously I mentioned that I wasn't super crazy about this edition. I just don't think it was executed well, even though the idea seems sound. I feel like causing consistent drag on the spool as it's being fed isn't necessarily a good thing. Just in principle. Additionally, if you're trying to use cardboard spools like I often do, this is an excellent way to ensure you have maximum dust and particulate fed into your system. And back when we did the K2 unbox, we ended up having to take apart our CFS unit because there was excess dust in the system. Or at least that's what we think happened. There was a clog and we took it apart and couldn't exactly find a smoking gun, but we do attribute it to extra dust being in the system. It was like week 1 and we had to take the thing apart. So the constant drag on cardboard spools, that was an immediate issue in that case. And with that in mind, that's only happened that one time, so maybe it's not an issue. Maybe we just got a weird roll of the dice. What do I know? But the second major addition that the CFS offers in its multicolor box is these little cutouts on the bottom. These little cutouts solve a huge problem that I have with my AMSs. I'm a Bamboo fanboy. I love it. It's all great. I buy it all. It's gonna take my money. That's fine. The AMSs not having access to the stupid little tubes underneath the cradle is just the most abhorrent oversight. Filament's gonna break off inside these tubes. Why is there no access? You can't push from one end to try and push the broken filament out. You can't access the tube unless you take the entire guts of the AMS out and unplug the tube to then push it out. It's the least super cool thing Bamboo's ever done. If the new AMS has this same issue, I don't know what to do. I mean, really, I'll probably buy it because I'm a hopeless fanboy. With all that in mind, these cutouts on the bottom of the CFS are great. It shows forward thinking, which is not something I expect from Creality, so good job on ya. I'm happy to see it. You like that? This is me pausing for the thumbnail. This is where I get it. So I've only ran 100 or so hours on this machine, but there are a few things that I've determined. For starters, this epoxy resin plate here is actually so excellent. It's so excellent. It's so good. It's nice and smooth, but everything sticks super well. I did have a tiny bit of lifting on the corners of these record holders, but otherwise that tiny inconsistency in the adhesion is the only thing that I could nitpick to find. It's really good. But wait, I hear you asking, how did that plate full of tiny multicolored nachos from the beginning of the video go? Did they all stick? That was a bit of a challenging print, but I've got to say, it went off without a hitch. Not only did we not have a single model fail, but the adhesion was so good that every model stuck to the plate even after it cooled off. And I had to flex the plate to even begin to get any of them to come free. And now I know in most cases it's more convenient to have a print auto-release after it cools, but in this case I'd rather have my prints stick too well without damaging the plate, than not stick throughout the print. I'm pleased. As for print quality, it looks good. None of the colors bled between color changes by the looks of it. The layers stacked correctly and smooth. None of the boundaries between the color changes look weird or anything. It all seems to be on par with this generation of multicolor machine. There's some stringing present, but you would expect that because this is PETG we're working with. And the multicolor system seemed to purge consistently and completely enough to fully evacuate the previous color without mixing into the next one. I didn't even find any stray purge blobs or strings or anything on the prime tower. Finally, to finish out my testing, I finished some Etsy orders that I had for these door stops that I make. I sell quite a few of these, so I'm consistently having printers burn these suckers off. Conveniently, they also offer a bit of insight into how well a machine prints. So for this print, I had 3 of these suckers loaded up on the plate. The machine did very well. First of all, the color changes are nice and crisp. There aren't any excessive strings present. The purge volume seemed to be great right out of the box. Looking at this nice flat surface on the side here, we would be able to see any layer shifting artifacts or ringing artifacts if they were present. They're not. And of course, if there were any bed adhesion issues, we could see on this kind of complicated first layer which pieces didn't want to stick. Everything stuck really well. The only real issue I could find was with the top surfaces. For some reason, these top surfaces are a bit rougher, perhaps over extruded or something like that, than any of the top surfaces I got on any of my other machines. Of course, this is something that can be tuned and played with to probably make it just fine, but it's something worth mentioning. So honestly, I wasn't expecting much from this machine. I figured we were looking at a Diet Bamboo A1 setup, and really if they'd delivered that, that would have been okay. But I can say definitively I was at least pleasantly surprised to use this machine, and pleasantly surprised with the results I got from it. It was wildly plug and play, and as a recovering Creality user, I wasn't expecting it to be plug and play at all. I was expecting to tinker, because that's what I had to do with all of my Creality machines back when I had them. Endlessly tinker and waste all of my time trying to fix a problem that would never recreate itself unless I had a 200-hour print going. You've been there. You know what I'm talking about. Although I haven't printed nearly long enough to speak to the long-term reliability of this machine, I have printed enough to know that it's a pretty good thing straight out of the box. And frankly, I'm impressed with the quality and the attention to detail that I am seeing. We don't have any affiliate links set up with Creality because they denied us. So if you are interested in this machine, just find a creator somewhere that's reviewing it and click on their link so at least somebody's getting supported from it, you know what I mean? Some of us are out here putting a lot of hours in and don't really get paid anything, so if you could support somebody in their efforts to promote a machine or to further the hobby that they love, you should probably do that. Anyway, thanks to JLC3DP for sponsoring this video. Check their link in my description. Bye! I can't drift out of frame. I'm trying.